Winston, it is time for another Viva on the Street. Now, I have been told in the last few Viva on the Streets that the camera was not pointed at my face properly, and I was told that because it was true. So I'm going to focus on keeping the camera pointed a little higher up. I couldn't get a vlog out today because one of my kids' school is canceled for the remainder of 2021. So I'm going to be going somewhat crazy trying to remain productive. But such is life as a parent. Okay, and we're going to do a Ghislaine Maxwell update. The dog, whenever I start doing this, starts biting at my feet. We're going to do a Ghislaine Maxwell update because there have been some updates, some interesting things going on. And wouldn't you know it, in the exact same week that Alec Baldwin was in New York visiting Woody Allen.
Mr. Baldwin, I have to ask you, what brings you to New York City?
I asked you to leave. Please go away.
A photograph under somebody's private home.
This is not anyone's private home. Are you?
Private home.
This is public property.
Go away.
Who's here? Did you really not pull the trigger? Do you believe it went off without you pulling the trigger?
I don't know when it was disclosed that his name was in Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Black Book, but it is. The same week that David Frum, the senior editor of The Atlantic, tells us on Twitter, get over here, that there is no trafficking problem. There is no child unlawful problem going on in the world. And if you think there is, you believe in a conspiracy theory and you can never be convinced otherwise because you're incorrigible and stubborn. From @David Frum, blue checkmark. The people who spread these rumors are impervious to fact and reason, but still, here are the facts and reason. And from the originating article on The Atlantic, across the United States, well-meaning citizens are raising awareness about very bad things epidemic that doesn't exist. @Kate_Tiffany unpacks how an internet conspiracy theory birthed a 21st century moral panic on The Atlantic article. His tweet, I have not been letting him live that tweet down because it's a preposterous tweet that he tweets this in the same week of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, in the same week of a senior producer at CNN getting arrested for very, very, very bad things. And to just come out and say, it's in your head. If you see all these things happening, who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? But the interesting updates in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Talked about it last night during the stream with Barnes, but there was an interesting ruling today on Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Black Book. For those of you who have not been following the trial, the prosecution, which initially announced that the trial was going to last like 6 weeks, called an end to their case. They have closed their case after, I believe it was 8 days. I believe they called something like, I'm going to get into the wind protector over here. I believe they called something like 25 witnesses overall. They called a number of witnesses who were women, but apparently only 2 victims were going to be left as witnesses, as alleged victims. And that's relevant because that does not leave a lot of wiggle room for what the jury is going to have to hang their hats on for a conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell. A lot of people are saying there were tons of alleged victims, tons of them. Why they wouldn't want to come forward or why the prosecution would not want to bring them forward, you can venture a guess. But the prosecution brought a handful, only 2 of which are going to be recognized as alleged underage victims, and people are asking some questions, but regardless, prosecution has now closed the case. There was the debate, the issue, the lingering question of the admissibility of Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Black Book. It's a Black Book that contains some names, lots of other things in there, potentially names of massage therapists, if that's what they were called. And there was an issue as to whether or not this infamous Black Book would be or could be admitted as evidence. Now, one of the witnesses, Juan Alessi, who used to work for Epstein or Maxwell or whomever for 12 years, I think it was 1990 to 2002, he testified that there was, in fact, this Black Book. It was in the manual, the household manual that employees were bound to respect. There was this infamous Black Book, but not the same one as the one that was being tendered as evidence. And so there was an objection from the defense that you can't admit this Black Book as evidence because on the one hand, it's not the Black Book that the former employee testified to having seen, and that the one that was being submitted, different book, had some alterations in it, some handwritten notes, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, the judge is going to allow the admission of that book or certain pages of that book, which will include unredacted names, under two caveats. One is that the submission of the book does not make evidence of any culpability of the names in the book. The objection was that it's hearsay. It does not make evidence for the content of the book, and until you have the individual who could admit that book into evidence, which will be never, because Epsteined himself, you can't admit that book because it's hearsay. The judge said, look, you can admit it because we're not submitting that book to make evidence of any culpability of the names in that book, but only to show Maxwell's involvement as the accused in that which she's being accused of. The other objection from the defense was that this book has been altered. It's got handwritten notes in it, yet post-its, and ultimately the judge said that would affect the probative value, but not the admissibility of the evidence. So that is to say, you could admit the evidence. The defense can argue that it's been altered and therefore it's unreliable, yada, 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 but that objection pertains to probative value, not admissibility. So we're going to see what comes out of that book, or at least the pages that are being submitted. But lo and behold, I don't know if it was discovered during the trial or if it was discovered earlier, but it's just making the waves now. Alec Baldwin had his name in that book, and I know it doesn't prove anything. Why is he? What are you doing? Look at this, right here. Yeah, now he's thinking about it. I know it doesn't prove anything. A lot of people have their names in that book. A lot of people are going to say that to the extent that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were running a blackmail extortion ring, they wanted to have big names in that book. Over here. They wanted to have big names in that book. The bigger the names, the more they could extort or whatever. We know that that would have been the game. But the prosecution has closed this case, and the next step up is on Thursday of this week. As of the time of shooting this vlog, the defense is going to start calling their witnesses and deducing their evidence. And the scandal, the prosecution or defense, or the procedural scandal of the week was that something like Friday night, the defense announces a bunch of additional disclosures, documents they're going to submit. They submit a list of witnesses in no particular order, 35 witnesses in defense. I'm not sure if that's in addition to the 8 witnesses that were already known to going to be called, but 35 plus witnesses for the defense, which is actually more than the witnesses for the prosecution. So prosecution objects to that and says, we don't know who their witnesses are. Well, we do know who they are, but we don't know what they're going to be testifying on, in what order. They filed a bunch of exhibits. The Friday evening special, quite literally, tardy, inadmissible. So we're going to see what documents are going to be admitted, and we're going to see what the order of the witnesses is going to be.
And we need to know what order they're calling their witnesses in. Comey says that the government previewed for several days prior to the close of the government's case that it would rest sometime last week. Following the close of our case, the government requested the defense provide the government with Rule 26.2 material along with, quote, a list of witnesses and an order of the first witnesses.
The defense, for its part, basically said they wound up early. We were expected to go much longer. We have to organize travel with all of these witnesses. And so, this is not a problem of our making, but we're going to do our best to accommodate. But it starts up again on Thursday. The people who are following this day in and day out on the ground, in court, Matthew Russell Lee from Inner City Press, Joe Neerman from Good Logic, that is Logic, like you would say it as a New Yorker, LAWGIC, doing great work. That's the update. And my goodness, what a time to be alive. What a trial to follow. Share this away so that people can know what is going on. A lot of people are following this trial, even if it's not being broadcast for the world to see. A lot of people out there are speaking loud for the world to hear. So with that said, if you like my videos, if you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. You know what to do. See you all in the next vlog. Winston, peace out. Peace out.